All right, so I'm pretty excited for today. I've got Jared MacLiver on here. He's got a super interesting story about how he got his first RV park, when he got his first RV park. So honestly, it makes me feel like I'm not doing enough every time I hear your, your story. So for background, Jared, you want to kind of tell people what you're most known for and how you got started?
Yeah, so at this point, I'm most known for owning a 141 space RV park in Quartzsite. I got started about a year and a half ago with my dad. I was just kind of a long story, right? Or around 16 and a half, I was working at a tree company. I'd been there for 2 or 3 years, and I decided it was time to go get my dream job. I've always wanted to do something with buildings or with cars, and I was in the process of rebuilding a 1942 Jeep and was really enjoying that. So I decided to go with cars, and here I am. No, I'm just kidding. Um, no, so obviously that didn't quite work out as planned. I got a job at a machine shop, working at an engine machine shop, and it didn't go very well. I was not details oriented. I'm a big thinker, and I was sitting there reading books like Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth, Life After Capitalism, things like that, while they're scrolling through South Park feeds on their YouTube. So didn't quite go together. After 8 months, great company. I left. Still would do business with them, but not the place for me to work. And so 2 or 3 months trying to figure out what I was going to go after, what I was going to pursue. And my dad, he'd always talk to me about investments. Obviously, I was reading books and stuff. And yes, then he started showing me some stuff with real estate. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to do something with buildings, I might as well own them. So we went out, we found a coach, uh, paired up with him. And after 6, 8 months of grinding, trying to find the deal, we found one and jumped in.
Now, so what was it about real estate that first caught your attention? Because I remember when I was 17, I remember just trying to come up with a plan to buy an RV itself, and get buddies to chip in. I couldn't even figure out how that would work. So what about real estate really caught your attention at such a young age?
Yeah. So the cash flow and equity plays that are available, and then the fact that, especially in commercial, it's really is the Wild West. You can do whatever you want. And my dad's done a lot of business. He's a EOS coach. I don't know if you can see behind me the EOS logo, the model right there. That's what that is. He's an EOS coach, and he's built 3 or 4 businesses and helped scale them and stuff. So he's been in the business side of things for a long time, but never the real estate side. And yeah, with that, just the the cash flow side of things and the tax stuff.
Nice, nice. Not even out of high school, already trying to figure out how to save on taxes. You're true American. I like that. Perfect. So you want to get into real estate, and then the first thing you think of is, okay, let me find a coach. So that's not the typical route I see people take. Most people, they'll read Bigger Pockets. They'll try to get into single family, then they're going to try to just scale that. And then at some point along the lines, I'm guilty of it too. That's how I got started. We just kind of bang our head against a wall and say, how the heck can we scale this? So your first approach is very different than a lot of people I've seen, even if people who've been in business for years. So obviously your dad's coaching probably helped, but what kind of sold you on the idea that, hey, I don't need to just get into real estate. I need to get a coach. I need to go that route and have somebody show me what to do.
Yeah. So I'm sure even in your journey, there's mentors that you gravitated to, correct?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and we didn't have anybody. Like I said, my dad was a businessman. He wasn't a real estate guy. And so uh with that, we knew learning, you have to have somebody to show you how it's done. It doesn't matter how smart you are. you don't know what you don't know. And we figured, you know what, we don't know anybody personally that can help us through this or that will help us through this. And so we hired a coach.
Yeah, that's smart. And I think I'm personally learning that as well, that it's kind of like what high school teaches you, right? That if you were to go out and do a prod, if you get assigned a project, you've got to do it all. If you had your classmate who's better at writing write it for you, you're going to get in trouble. Whereas in the real world, the exact opposite is true. If you're bad at writing and you just keep writing, no one's going to care. But if you hire an expert writer to help you, you can get a lot more stuff done. So that's pretty awesome. So how did that process go? I mean, did you walk into the coach and just say, "Hey, look, are you 17 at this point or still 16?"
No, I was about 17 and 4 months, so right at
So you're
17.
set. So you're 17. You tell him like, "Hey, I want to get into real estate." And did he kind of coach you on which asset class might make sense, or did you kind of come with the idea that RV parks made the most sense to you?
No, so it started off, I went to a Grant Cardone real estate summit. That's where it first started in November of 23. And I think we hired the coach in February or March of 24. So there was a little bit of vetting the coaches too. We looked at a couple different ones and no, I went in with apartments. So apartments were, still the hot thing for beginners. Obviously, everybody who's been watching the market for any time and realizes that is not the time to get into apartments. But that was the hot thing that everybody was talking about. And so that's what I was looking around at. But I came in open minded. And so when I talked to my coach, I started first, he taught me how to underwrite a deal, and then he taught me how to talk to brokers and talk to property managers, get a property manager to look at a property, make sure it's really worth what they're wanting, things like that. And in that, I underwrote, I don't even know, I can say so many and people go, ooh, ah, if they're a beginner, right? And then the professionals go, you're slacking, you step it up. So whatever. Anyways, I underwrote a bunch of deals. None of them penciled. Now I know why. But in that, we just kept slowly expanding our search criteria to include mobile home parks. And then an RV park slipped in. And here we are.
Nice. So it was just kind of keeping an open mind. And I see a lot of people do that. They get into multifamily because they're familiar with it. A lot of people just underwrite. And then they just get frustrated and say, "Hey, I'm just going to buy something. It doesn't really need to make that much sense. I just got to get started." So how many months do you think you were working on looking at multifamily before you said, "You know what? I need to keep an open mind and look at other things"?
Um, I'd say it's 3 or 4 months that we were just, it was strictly multifamily. Nah, it's probably less than that because we were under contract for 3 months. So it was maybe a month and a half, 2 months that we were no only multifamily. And then we started, man, this is really not penciling. So what's penciling?
So when you looked at this RV park deal for the first time, how did you find it? Was it directly reaching out to the seller or was it from a broker?
No, it was actually on Crexy. So it was a full
Okay.
on market deal.
Okay. How long had it been on Crexy?
Been on Crexy for, I know over 100 days. I want to say over 180.
Okay, gotcha. So walk me through that process. So you've got this deal on Crexy. I guess the first step you underwrote it and you said, "Hey, there might actually be something here."
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And then so how did it go? I'm really curious to know this because I've done a couple deals at this point, and sometimes it's still hard to get brokers to take me seriously. So I'm really curious how you were able to, maybe because it was on the market for 100 days, but how did that go when you first reached out to them? Did you mention how old you are? Did you just you just leave that out of it and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in this. Can you give me some more info?"
Yeah, that's pretty much how I did it. I just kind of left my age out. And then after the first or second call, maybe on like the third one, I kind of threw that in as a teaser, but by then I'd already introduced my dad too. So
Gotcha. So
they
that
knew that
helps.
there was a full team behind it.
That's good. Yeah, that's a really good way to go about it. So when you started underwriting, at what point did you realize like, hey, this actually makes sense? I think I'm going to send an offer. And how did that go? Was your offer ask price? Was it below? How did that whole process pan out?
Yeah, so we spent, I don't even remember, it was a few weeks going back and forth, especially since again we're first timers, going back and forth with our coach. What makes sense? What assumptions are we using? Um, Especially with an RV park, it's right on that line between a active business and a real estate investment. And so sometimes it's kind of hard because you can make the numbers do anything you want.
Yeah.
And so we spent a little bit of time just trying to figure out what assumptions to use. And
What was
then,
the? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, keep going.
no, yeah, you're good. Yeah. And then just we came at an offer. It was less than what he would take. And we settled kind of in between. So
Nice. So what was the
just,
the thing that you looked at that deal and said, okay, here's how we can increase the value, right? Was it from the occupancy? Was their rent were the rents really, really low? Was it just poorly managed? Like what jumped out to you that like, hey, right now it's here, but we can get it here if we do XYZ.
yeah. So it was a threefold. And that's why we liked it. There was three different ways coming in that were completely separate that we thought we could double the NOI. And we figured, hey, we're newbies at this. There's no way we're going to nail all three. So hopefully, between a combination of all three, we're going to double the NOI. That was our theory. There's so much upside in this. If we put in the work, I don't see how we can go wrong. And they were billing back electrical. It's the only park in town that wasn't. Adding propane delivery. So there are a few places in town that sell propane, but there's not, I think there's only one that delivers propane. And so we're still working on getting that service offered, but that's there's those two. And then raising the occupancy. So in the long terms, there's definitely getting it to the 50% occupied during the summer is alone, like I said, doubles the rent. And then now, after having managed the park for a few months, we realize how much management inefficiencies there were.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part about real estate investing. And you get into it and you think, hey, cool, I got this awesome passive investment. And then you realize you just got, even if it's something really simple, you've got another job or another business. So, um, in that process, so in this deal, like, okay, it was seller financing, correct?
Yes, sir.
Cool. So how did that work? Because I've always found that sellers who want to finance it really want to get to know the seller or the buyer at least once. So was that an easy process to kind of go out there and convince them like, hey, we know what we're doing. You can trust loaning your money essentially to us on this deal.
No, so it was honestly, it was a little bit of a blessing. They were offering it because they were trying to sell it. And they were in a position where they didn't want the asset anymore, but they could use the cash flow. So they just wanted out of managing it. They'd been burnt on, I know for sure, one, maybe two property managers just totally cashing them in. They'd only owned it for somewhere between 2 and 4 years. I struggled to put the whole story together even now because everybody's got their own story. And even on the property records, it doesn't always line up. So, but they'd been burnt with their property manager, um, stealing and hiring people and giving them free spots and things. So they wanted out. They were they're in Minnesota and just they were done.
Gotcha. How far is the property from where you live full time?
It's 2 hours.
Okay. So it's not, so that part you were like, hey, if something comes up, I can go out here. I'm not going to go to college, so I won't have any any classes to be studying for. I can go do it. That's cool. So that's another interesting point. So you've, and I know we've spoken about this before when we first met, but you knew college. Hey, this is not for me. I want to go right into doing this. That part I think is super interesting because at least where I grew up in Northern Virginia, the only thing we're taught is, hey, you go to high school so you can go to college. So what was jumping out to you in high school that like, hey, I don't need that. That's not something I need to waste 4 years and who knows how much money on. Like, what was the things that jumped out to you that like I can just skip that whole phase of life?
Yeah. So I'll take extra credit and then I'll put it where it's actually due. It wasn't jumping out to me in high school. It was like end of grade school, middle school. But what was jumping out at me was my dad. So, um, it's definitely teaching. It's 100% teaching. Um, it's a trade school. So college is supposed to be treated like a trade school. It's not treated like a trade school. If you're a doctor, you should go to college. I don't want you to touch me if you're not gone to college, right? But at the same time, there's no reason for a plumber to go to college. That's not where he needs to go. He needs to go to a place like West Mac. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a trade school in Phoenix, pretty big name. Things like that. You don't go to college to learn how to frame a house, right? You go to trade school. And so that's why I got a mentor. That's my college. I believe in education. I just don't believe that
In
college is the
college?
right education for me.
Yeah, that's smart, and that's what I've tried to articulate to people before. Because I went to college. The first 2 years, I didn't feel like I got much out of it. The next 2 years, I did, but it was still kind of slow. Right? I'm fast paced. I don't think it needs to be 4 years. I think what you're saying is perfect. It's not that you don't believe in education, because that'd be kind of a far stretch to claim, but it's not college, right? If you went out and said, hey, I want to do this, let me hire somebody who's going to teach me how to do this. I don't need to know how to do anything outside of it. I don't need to take geology classes. I don't need to take, scuba. That was actually a class I had in college. I just want to learn how to get into real estate. Let me find an expert. So I think that's pretty cool that you took that route.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this way, yeah, I end up with debt, but the debt's making me money,
That's
right?
right. That's right. Nice. So you go under contract on this deal. What was that like? Was that just like exciting? Was there parts of that made you super nervous? Like, man, now we've actually got to pull this off. Like, how did that process go?
Yeah, it was all of the above. All of the above. I've said a couple times, I can't tell. You said it was slow pace. This is the exact opposite. This is drinking from a fire hose and you have to catch every last drop. Otherwise, you're dead.
Yeah.
And so I've said this before and I'll say it again. Um, this was either the smartest decision I've ever made or the dumbest one, and it might be both. I'm pretty sure it's both. So yeah, it's not a course that most can take, honestly. And I'm not sure. I mean, I'm 6 months in, 8 months in, something like that. And yeah, I'm here. But again, it was rough. So but yeah, it was definitely all of the above emotions. Scared, terrified, exhilarated, fun. Am I gonna lose my life over this?
Yeah,
Right?
every time it doesn't go away. I'll tell you that either. Every time I get a deal under contract, the first 24 hours is like, cool. My wife and I would go out to dinner, we get something to celebrate. And the next day it's like, oh crap. I gotta figure this out. I gotta get a bank. I gotta get a property manager lined up. I gotta get some inspections done. And before you make money, I mean, it's even if you buy the property, it's gonna be a while before you make money. You start coming out of pocket real fast on stuff that you never knew. Like I remember getting a phase one for environmentals for the first time, and I was like, I didn't think about this. I just wanted to buy real estate. I don't want to have to figure out what somebody did with the property 50 years ago. But if I don't, I could be in a lot of trouble. What was the most surprising thing? If you could boil it down to one thing, as soon as you went under contract, what was the most surprising thing of like, oh my gosh, I never thought about this?
Um, how crazy people can be.
How so? How so?
Yeah, so um I had when I took over, it's a good thing I was as active. I was out there once a week. So it's a good thing I was as active as I was, because when I got there, there was 3 people. We hired on 2 more, and right now we have 2 employees, and only one of them is started with me. So there's been a lot of turnover, and I've had like 10 or 15 employees over that time. Um, we started, there was 3 ladies. One's still with me, phenomenal. She's running the thing. She's been running it for 2 or 3 years. She's not the one that was cheating. She was under the ones that were cheating. And when the seller fired the cheaters, um, he'd been burned and he didn't know who to trust. But she's good. She's really good. Then there was a cleaner who was okay. She was fine as a cleaner, but she wanted to tear apart the team, and she ended up leaving. There was a backup cleaner and backup office lady who I'll get to later. And then we hired an event director and a maintenance guy. There's no maintenance guy. And the event director was corporate and big wig and all of that stuff. So coming to a very entrepreneurial venture, especially with an 18-year-old at the helm, um, was not her pace. And that kind of blew up. She ended up leaving. She kind of prompted the cleaner to leave too. And so we ran with the backup cleaner doing the cleaning full time, and the main lady, and then our maintenance guy. And that was good for a while. And then we were coming into our busy season. It's in Arizona, so the busy season is winter. And we hired 2 more people because we were going into our busy season. And those were a kind of a floater, which was good. We needed her. We had a floater, and then another maintenance guy, who had been the maintenance guy for 4 years previously with the old owners. And so we figured that his experience would be good and stuff like that. So they worked together okay for a little bit, and then it blew up again. Um, in the middle of December, I ended up having to fire the part-time cleaner, who is now full-time, and the original maintenance guy, not the guy I hired on who had been there for 4 years previous to me, but the new guy that had pretty much only been there under my management. He had run off a guest or two with his anger issues, and he was irritating a lot more. And then the cleaner, she'd gotten drunk on the clock twice. And so that kind of, and she was already fumbling um a lot of other things too. So but yeah, that was definitely not fun. So then we ran that team, and we ended up hiring on another part-time office for a while. And then the floater and the part-time office just left because they're seasonal workers and they're good terms, and kind of hope they'll be back next year. So
And this is in what span of time is everything you just mentioned? You said like 8 months.
yeah, this is like 6, 8 months. This is since basically the beginning of October.
I hope the people listening to this take it and understand that hey, it is not as easy as it sounds. Every guru is like, hey, buy this, you get cash flow. My favorite term is mailbox money. It's like I have no idea who invented that, but they must be out of their mind. But that's it's crazy to hear you talk. I mean, so there's a lot of people involved with running the park. Then, how many people in total do you think you need to run the park the way you'd want to run it?
So again, since it's a more seasonal business, during the summer, 2 will be good. During the winter, 3 full time. If somebody wants to work part time, obviously we'll need another person to make up for that. And then with us adding propane delivery, we're probably going to have to add a person for that. So
Nice. So, what are the main components of these people? Like, what are the main responsibility that these people do every day to make sure the park runs effectively?
yeah, they are. the whole park management. So that's what the girl that's still with me is doing. She's running basically all of the office admin tasks at the park level. And then there's the maintenance guy that's out there fixing broken water spigots and doing little upgrades and trimming trees and things like that. And then, like I said, the propane guy, we haven't hired him yet because we don't need him yet because the project's not done. But that there's going to be that position. And then there is um, the floater who helps with extra maintenance and takes a day or two in the office. So that way, because we need to be open 7 days a week during season, and takes that from the office property manager during the summer, or she takes that from her during the winter, what she usually does during the summer. And then again, if she wants to work part-time, they split that between two part-time people.
Nice. What have you found to be effective when you're hiring people? Because that's a job in of itself, and I still I don't know if there is a solution. I keep hiring people I think will do great, they do bad, and I don't hire people thinking they'll do bad. But sometimes I inherit somebody when buying a new park who worked for the past one thinking they'll do okay, and they do phenomenal. I really can't put my finger on what it is yet, so I'm always curious to hear what other people have found as like a good green flag and good red flags for hiring people.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not the expert on that. I lucked out to have the one lady with me through all of this, and um, and then the other three that I'm still, I'll say, still on good terms with. Right, I would hire back, or they're still with me. Again, I just lucked out; they were there looking for a job. Um, I don't have the secret. However, my dad has actually written a book on it called Hire Better People Faster, and it's actually on the shelf. I'll grab it.
Let's do it. Let's do the plug.
Yeah. So this is backwards, but you can see at least see the book cover, right? So
Yeah, that's awesome.
it's by Ryan England and Jeremy MacLiver. Jeremy MacLiver's my dad. Um, and then they have like a little pamphlet one that they wrote too. That's um how to hire the ones you don't want to fire. So those are both really good.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like with RV parks especially, it's a business like you said, it's seasonal, and so you got to stay on top of it. And I found that sometimes you can't do anything about it. Sometimes people just leave because their life changes, and at least in your case, it's more than one employee. One thing I find with mobile home parks all the time, we have one person to do everything because two is just too much. The second they're gone, you're back to zero. So it's very hard to absorb things. But if your maintenance guy leaves, you can have somebody on site keep an eye on something, do real simple stuff for a couple of weeks until you get to that next person and get them in the door. So that's great. What would you say has been the biggest shock of actually owning the property? So we kind of went over like how the operations and how crazy people can be. But what are some of the other things that you're just like, wow, I never realized that you have to do this when you have property?
Mostly it's been the people one. Um, if there's another one, I'm gonna stick with the people one
Yeah.
because I'm not running the maintenance. I'm overseeing the maintenance from like basically two tiers above, right? So I don't see that or I see that, but I'm not involved in that. And then um yeah, so
Yeah, it's
mostly
people. I
people
mean, I
management.
I forget who said it, but I heard a quote that was basically saying business is incredibly simple until people are involved, which is true. Absolutely true. I was at the same point you were about a year and a half ago, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it all with AI and spreadsheets and automations. I'm not going to have any people. And that went well for a while, and then it stopped going well. So like it's just a fact of it. You got to have some people, and you got to put your neck out there. You got to trust some people. It's just a matter of kind of staying on top of them. and making sure that they're doing what they should do so you can get back to what you're doing. So you're 8 months into it now. What was your initial business plan? Did you say, hey, we're going to hold this 5 years, 3 years, indefinitely? Where was that? And then has that changed anymore after owning it for 8 months?
Yeah, so we went in like a good Donald Trump fan and had multiple exit strategies. There's go in and hold it for 2.5, 3 years and sell it, or do a end of year 4 refi or middle of year 5, whatever, because we have 5-year debt with the seller, or there is sell it in 5 years, a couple different options. So we have that. And then as far as changing, just the only thing that has changed is our desire to get out, which has grown. Um, it's a rough demographic. The tenants are definitely the roughest, about the roughest you can get. I'm sure there's rougher, but I definitely don't want to experience them. And so it really makes it hard to do cool things, right? So that's that's what I want to do in life, is do cool things and make a buck at it too while I'm doing them. And so kind of makes it hard when you got to watch your back over everything, you know? And so,
I hear you. I hear you. The phrase,
yeah,
this is why we can't have nice things, that probably comes out of my mouth like once a week. I'll get some complaint from a park and I'm like, what? Who did that? Like, who in the world did that? Why do I have to now address this situation? This is crazy. Um, but it's you'd be surprised, man. And actually, you won't be surprised. I have had cockfighting rings get formed, and I have to like deal with that. I've had people burning tires, and it's like it's definitely the minority, but it's enough to just make you think like, man, can we just have a nice community? Can everybody just do their thing? Really hard to turn that around if that's where you're at. It's like it takes work, and those are the best deals because you can take the same physical property and turn it into a completely different vibe. But man, it takes time, it takes effort, and yeah, it takes some gray hair for sure.
yeah. I forgot about this, but um the week I bought it, we closed on Friday. Okay. Um Sunday, I get a call from my property manager, the head girl, right, that's still with me. Um, and I'm hanging out with my friends. It's in between church services on Sunday. I'm hanging out with all my friends, right? And I get this call from my property manager. The razor's gone. Somebody stole the razor. So for the next week, they didn't have they didn't have any wheels there. They took they pulled the ignition key out, or the ignition out, so you had to start it with a screwdriver. And I think we just got that fixed like a week and a half ago. But we got the razor back in about 2 weeks. But there was definitely a this is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, yeah. But I'll tell you what the mentality I've adopted is every time I face one of these things, it's one more thing that I know how to prevent. And you and I are both on the young side. I typically think I'm like one of the younger people in real estate till I meet you. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm old. Um, but it's all of these things. Every time you face some sort of setback or some sort of problem, it's another reason that somebody else gets out. And just the longer you do it, the more you do it, you realize like, hey, I've seen, I will never ever say I've seen it all because I've learned the second I say that something I would never have imagined comes out of the blue. Um, but it also is like, hey, that's one less person that would have dealt with that and decided to keep going. So if you do it for long enough, eventually you're going to be one of the only people who's been around long enough to see all that and can keep going and really learn to operate these. And that's what it takes. A lot of people think you get into real estate, you just quickly start making money, and you don't. You've got to really take the time to learn the lessons, figure out what works and what doesn't. And that's a good thing I want to ask you about this after this is assumptions. you have an assumption of, hey, this is what we're going to do, and then immediately like, hey, that's not working. So what's something like that that you've noticed that your plan was, hey, we're going to do this, shouldn't be too bad, and then you realize quickly, hey, we've got to pivot because that is not working for whatever reason.
Yeah. The most recent one is, like I said, the long-term strategy. That's probably the I wouldn't say the easiest because you can just throw money at a problem and bill back electrical, but the most obvious one is to raise the occupancy, the long-term occupancy. And we were doing head counts in June, July, August last year while we were under contract. And there was like 60, 62 trailers, physical occupancy. And they were running numbers for like 45, 50. And we're like, oh boy, here we go. Right. So then we're like, okay, cool. Well, we're buying it based on 40, 50 because they don't go out there but once a year in November. And so we're buying it for 45, 50 trailers during the summer numbers. And come February of 25, I look at our reservations for the summer and I'm like, oh, snap, here we go. We have 25 people scheduled to be long term. And next time I went to the property, sure enough, there's all the reservations check out. Physical occupancy is reconciling. And I've been keeping an eye on that part of it. And I've never caught any discrepancies except for like, oh yeah, they just pulled in last night and after hours and I hadn't got to the computer, like, you know, real life happens kind of things. But and honestly, there's not too many of those too. Otherwise I'd be raising my eyebrows. But yeah, so definitely there's the, oh man, this is not working. I gotta get this up. I gotta advertise and market and take another look at my prices, make sure we're priced competitively and what are we offering? How can we not lower our prices but increase our offering and things like that?
Nice. So you're in a seasonal market, right? You said it's part of Arizona, so yeah, I'm guessing you get snowbirds coming down there. Um, are your long-term tenants, are you talking about people who stay more than a month or 12 months or just throughout the summer, which is your slow season there? What is a long-term tenant in terms of that?
Yeah, so I think legally it's 28 days. Um, but we start really hammering on them after 90 days because there are people that like to stay, November, December, January, because January is the big month. January, if your park does not hit a few days of absolute 100% occupancy, you're not doing something right. And so that's cool. You can get some cool pictures and things. But so there's people that like to go November, December, January, or, December, January, February, whatever that looks like. And so that's why we chose 90 days. After that, you're probably staying more than just season. You're probably staying long over the summer, things like that. So that's what
Nice.
it
Are
looks
these
like for us.
mostly are those people who stay in the busy season, are they mostly living in an RV somewhere else the rest of the year? Or is this just, an escape from their house up north or something like that?
Um, in this demographic, I believe it's mostly people that are on the go 24/7. Um, One of our seasonal workers, I know her story a little bit more because I spent more time with her. She's a Canadian. She spends just under 6 months in the US, just over 6 months in the Canada. You can see why, right? And so um that's her. She's she lives off of managing or running, employing at RV parks, and she's lived like that for a long time, and she's just got her trailer and her truck and that's it. So there's a lot of people like that. And then there are the odd reprieve from the home, but at least from what I've seen, again, I'm not on the front lines booking people. But from what I've seen, if it's a reprieve from home, it'll be a shorter stay, a week long, 2 weeks.
too.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Nice. So that brings up another interesting question. So I looked at the park that you've got and the kind of its general market, and there seems to be another RV or park or two nearby. What have you found to be successful to set your park apart? Because obviously, when people are coming down there, if they're traveling, they've never been there, right? They're not local. They can't just drive by and check it out. What has what have you noticed gets people in your park versus going to other parks? And what maybe have you noticed that people are going to other parks that you are trying to replicate?
Yeah. So things I'll start with things we have going for us. Um, this is not something that I would think of. I'm a tenter. So and I've made fun of RVers. We have a lot of friend RVers. I've made fun of RVers for a long time. So this is like the funniest karma you can ever see, me owning an RV
Mm-hmm.
park, right? But that said, I wouldn't have seen this. But one of the things we have going for us is actually a very big driveway. We have a very easily accessible when you're pulling in with your fifth wheel. Another thing is, while we are in the middle of about 50 RV parks in town, we are literally between Main Street and the I-10, which is the two main corridors. And so we back up to the I-10, we're off of Main Street, we're literally in the heart of town. So that helps. And then something that it's not necessarily was going for us when we took it over, but it was super easy to capitalize on, is these are mostly mom and pop run deals. And so the website, the online, a lot of them don't have websites. Like they just don't have them. And to be competing against that, especially in today's market where, you Google anything and there's 30 websites that pop up that have the latest SEO and they're all fighting Google ads and right. And there's nobody, you know, and then the ones that do are clear they haven't updated or they're older website styles and designs. And so just to have something modern, and I'm not trying to, be in the face pop-ups and things like that. Those irritate me on a consumer level. So I'm gonna try to replicate that on a offering level, but just to have something that looks presentable
And easy to
and that
use too. My wife and I, we were
right.
just trying to plan an RV trip the other day, and it's just like you said. Some of them, I mean, some of them are the .gov, so I'm never going to expect the government to do a good job at anything. But some of the websites where it's like, man, this looks like a cool place, but I can't figure out how to book it, and people have a short attention span, especially today. We're living in the TikTok generation. That's who I think we see more and more. The younger generation are the ones who are buying and living in RV parks because they can't afford anything else, and they can work from anywhere. So it's actually pretty awesome opportunity. But they're not going to sit there and try to find your number on Google Maps and give you a call. Like that's just not going to happen. And I see it all the time with mobile home parks too, where people don't even have a phone number. Like I've tried so many different properties where I'm like, I really want to speak to this owner about buying it, and I can't for the life of me figure out how to get a hold of them. I can't. If I go to the property, there's no sign, there's no nothing. I have to go around the house and ask the tenants, and sometimes they don't even know. It's incredible. And they just say, hey, we mail our money to this address. We don't know how to get a hold of the owner. Which mobile home parks is there's very little operations, so that's more prevalent. It's shocking to me that in an RV park where, hey, you do a little extra hustle, you can get your occupancy up 10%. It's surprising to me that people don't do that. Um, but it sounds like from what you're saying, the operations are so heavy, people get into this wanting it to be less, and then so they do less, even if it means less money, that means less work for them. So good opportunity for someone like you to come along and do the work and get it filled, um, and then move on to the next thing. So have you thought more about like, hey, if we do get this thing sold, everybody does that, right? We buy a property, we're super excited about it, and then a couple of years go by. You kind of have to marry it before you date it. You can't just run it for a couple months and then see if you like it. You have to just dive in. So I've got a few parks I'm selling too. But have you thought more about like, hey, which asset class do I want to stay in? Do I want to stay in RV? And has this park taught you anything about what you want to look for in a future deal?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's taught me so much. Um, yeah, we would keep it if we could get my operations of it. Obviously, there's on-site people, but if we could build those relations with our employees and get the management off my time, because my dad's not running the real estate side of things. He's coaching me, but he's not running it. It's my baby. And so if we can get that time down, then we would consider doing a long-term hold. As far as the next deal, definitely we're going to look for something that's, again, at least 50% long terms, uh, or can be converted to that, right? And that can be a value add play, but we're looking for that stability, especially with the volatility that we already have in this park, which is good for upswings, but it's scary on the downswings. So
I bet.
we're trying to
I
balance
bet.
that.
Because your debt, I'm sure, is your debt on that structured to where it's just a fixed monthly, every month it's the same payment?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you got to be pretty diligent. I mean, I'm sure. Does it cover it in the slow months? Do you have enough NOI to cover the debt in slow months usually?
So I don't know yet because I haven't been through the slow months. Um, so far, it has covered every month except for February and March. Um, and again, we're trying to get it right back there. Although it was making some really great cash flow through the end of quarter four, and so of 2024. So we're still projecting a positive cash flow this year of very doing very well. But at the same time, it's a it's big swings. So you have to keep a lot of liquidity.
Yeah, that's smart. I've talked to owners who their park is open 3 months out of the year, and it's like, man, that's a you got to have a stomach to do that. But it sounds like you guys have actually a really solid one. Some seasonality, but even in the slow months, it's still good. So cool. So do you
Yeah.
think so more on the point of like what would you look in a future RV park if you would do another RV park? It sounds like you would because it sounds like it's going well. So what in addition to the long term, is there anything else that you've noticed about the region? Is there anything else about where the property is physically located that you would try to change on the next one you do?
Yeah. The only thing that would I'm not going to invest in quartzite most likely within the next few deals because quartzite is going through either some growth pains or they're on a downward trend. I'm not sure which. And it'll be fine with one, but I have enough invested in quartzite. It's time to get in a different market. Um, owning that much of a market is definitely I would not count it as a plus. I would count it as a downside. Um,
What do you
so
mean
just
by that? Owning that much of a market?
quartzite is somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 people in the summer. And so to add 30 people, which, I mean, that's a lot of tenants. That's a lot of tenants, but that's not a lot of people. But that's what? That's a whole full percent of an entire town you're trying to convince to stay at your park. And that's where, like, when you're trying to convince one whole percent of the population to come to you, that's what I'm looking at. And so just knowing that when I'm coming into a market or and being aware of that. I'm not saying I wouldn't. I just know it's a risk. And then another big thing is park owned homes. I haven't had to deal with them, but I've already seen enough that I'm not interested at all. at least not for a very long time. I probably would buy apartments before I would buy something with park-owned homes, just because they're all the same, and you're dealing
You
all the
talking
same.
about um, mobile homes or RVs on the park?
There would probably be mobile homes, but honestly, in a market like Quartzsite, I could totally see. Um, I've actually already gotten 3 campers, different scenarios, abandoned and things like that. But I've already gotten campers that I could potentially rent out, but I'm not interested because of the obligations that come with that. And so
What
just
kind of what kind of is it mostly just like the operations, the cleaning it, or are there any like legal aspects to that that you'd have to jump through?
yeah, the cleaning, the maintenance, it's a whole nother level of maintenance. And so that's why I would still be interested in owning apartments, but I don't want to own park owned homes, is because um then you're mixing, right? An apartment, I can get an apartment manager that knows that, hey, when the plumbing breaks, it's not the tenant's responsibility at all. Versus if I'm in a split park, well, what side is it? Um, how new is the trailer? The other thing is each um unit is a different unit. It's a different building. And it doesn't matter if you can technically go in there and replace them all, but that's very capital intensive. And I'd be interested to see that pencil out. And so, therefore, when you come in and they're park owned homes, there's going to be at least a good percentage of them that are not the same. They're different.
Yeah, they're the bane of my existence. Honestly, I've when I first started, I just had a super tight geographic region. I bought any park in that region. Some of them were all park owned homes. Some of them had no park owned homes. I was a fan of the park owned home ones in the beginning, but like you said, every single house is different, different manufacturer, different policy. It's tough. It's tough to maintain anything because it's not a simple $20 fix. Even if you've got somebody on site, they're going to have to call around, find the part, or just completely replace a unit because the faucet's leaking. Now you need a whole new vanity. And you can't say no when people have legitimate requests, but at a certain point, you feel like you have to draw a line because they're not built like an apartment would. They're not built to the standards of a code, right? At least, I mean, they have a manufactured housing code, but it's different than something that's a commercial property or a single family rental would be. It's very, very tough to draw that line. And I found there's just really no good way to get out of that without hiring someone who's extremely experienced in that space. And they're very hard to find and they're not cheap. So yeah, I would second your opinion on that. Stay away from it. Renting land is awesome. Renting land could not be easier, and it's to me the best way to grow in real estate because you can get to 1,000 units and still have the same policy at every single property because it's easy. And your operations will get more complex, but not complex to the nth degree of trying to keep track of all this stuff. The people I've seen who do well with that live on site or live very close to it. And they can turn it into a cash cow and more power to them. They have somebody who it's either them or somebody really, really close to them on site who can go do stuff for cheap. But in reality, they're not really running a property with low expenses. They're just not charging the property for their time. So they basically have a job. So yeah, you're on the right track. 8 months is a quick amount of time. You don't even have them yet. You've realized that. So that's smart. Because once you do, you kind of have to deal with them or sell them. But well, cool. What has it changed your opinion on what type of park you'd want? Because I know there's parks outside of major attractions like national parks. There's parks where the park is the attraction, right? It's a resort. People want to come for water slides. And then you have some that are just basically a mobile home park with RVs where people stay and that's their home. Have you thought more about which type is the most attractive to you after having done it for 8 months now?
Definitely. Definitely. Now I'm looking at actually diversifying across all of them. I'm looking at my next be my next 4 parks um, over the next few years, and just try to figure out, okay, what am I looking for, and then pursuing those. Because I don't want all mobile home parks because I feel like there's you can get more aggressive than that if you're willing to put in work and be rewarded for that. But at the same time, I don't want all RV parks because then um something happens and all your tenant base is gone and you have nothing holding it up. And so in those next 4, which would potentially include this one as a 5th, it would look something like a full mobile home park. Or and to me it doesn't matter whether it's RVs and travel trailers and fifth wheels and things like that, or if it's actual park models. Like, are you renting the land or are you renting the RV with the land? Like that, at this point, they're clearly different. They're clearly different. But what are you renting? And so if you're just renting the dirt, there's obviously a level of difference, but at the same time, at a high level, it's not too different. Um, so it'd be a full long term, probably 2 of them. I would look at a full resort, so where the park is an attraction and you're working the top end, you have to stay on the cutting edge kind of thing. And then another split where it's pass-throughs, people staying overnight, and then the basis of long terms to keep the bills paid.
Nice. Yeah, it's good to the added part to the what you're talking about there. That's nice about taking that approach. You can only put your focus into one thing and do really, really well at it. That's something I've struggled with a lot lately. If like, hey, if you try to do, you could give me 10 different things, and if you ask me to do it, I'll get really good at it. But if you ask me to do 10 things ongoing and simultaneous, I become bad at all of them. And it's the same thing with properties. If you have a property like you mentioned that you need to put a lot of time and effort into, and you could really turn it around like a resort where you can have golf cart rentals and water slides and arcades and all this other stuff, you could do a really good job of that. But you don't want to have that on every single property. Otherwise, you're going to start finding that you have 5 properties that do okay, and then you end up being the guy selling at a discount versus like what you said. If you get a couple of those stable ones, there's something about stability that is awesome. Like I have a park that is the highest price per lot that I've ever paid for one. I've gotten 2 maintenance requests since I've owned it. I've owned it about 10 months now. And I've had one person move out, and she moved out because her home was repossessed. So it wasn't like, hey, how are we doing this month? Every month it's like clockwork. And when somebody moved out, I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? But it's one's problem. And all that time allowed me to focus on new opportunities and put effort into those. But I don't want to do just that. Like you said, like you've got to, like if you're an entrepreneur, you want to find ways to really, really focus on something. Find that one RV resort that you could put all your blood, sweat, and tears and your energy into and really, really transform. So I think it's a great approach you're taking. I think it's awesome. And when you find that all mobile home park, give me a call. I'll help you out with it.
All right, I appreciate that.
That's my bread and butter.
Yeah, yeah. I love how collaborative the real estate space is.
Yes, that is something I think most people would benefit, including myself, to have learned earlier. It's so freaking hard to do one deal. And your deal, I'm surprised that you were able to do as much as you have. I know you have people supporting you, but it's still a lot. I mean, because somebody's got to run the operations, the bookkeeping, the taxes. You got to get it closed. You need to, everything you could possibly imagine. There are so many things that people don't think of when they get their first property. It's so much easier to find a partner to do that part, and then you just focus on what you're good at, get really good at it. Which brings up a good point. So obviously, when you bought this, it wasn't zero down, right? Like you had to come up with some sort of capital to buy the park. Do you want to walk us through how that went, like how that process how you found the person that you invested in, kind of what you found to be successful in finding the investor?
Yeah, so back to putting credit where credit's due. It's my dad's relationship. Good friend of my dad that owns a tree company, and they've been friends for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And my dad, when he started his coaching business, this guy was actually his first client, and my dad was really going through quite a lot of things. It was his rough time he was pulling out of. And right, so he's been on the journey with my dad to an extent, and his company too, and he's seen the wisdom that my dad has learned and has and all of that stuff combined. And so in that, when we came to him and say, "Hey, we got this deal, would you be interested in putting the cash up for it?" We basically have a note with him. So there's no equity with him. He's not an equity partner. He's getting what he thinks, what is great for a CD. He's getting 9%. He looked at it. Well, I can get a high yield interest rate on a savings account. I can't get 9%, or I can give it to my friend, and in 2 years I get it back. 2, 3 years I get it back, 9%. So that's what it was. It was a relationship that we had for a long time.
Yeah, and then another good thing about the deal being seller finance is that you could do that because
Right.
banks typically won't, and it's there's different ways to kind of work around that, but that's pretty nice. So you basically did get 100% financing. You've got the seller note, and then you got effectively a second mortgage on it too.
Right. Right.
Nice. That's inspirational to anybody listening because I know the toughest part about getting into real estate. If you have the time, it's typically because you don't have the money, and it's like, man, you need one or the other. I'd say the time is the easier one to come up with because there's so many people out there with the money who wanting to get in real estate. And it's just natural. If people have a lot of money, it's usually because they don't have a lot of time. They're usually got some sort of business or job. So that's awesome. Um, but yeah, I think another thing I would tell you from like all the headaches and all the things you talked about that you had to go with, I'm sure there's great wins too, obviously. But one thing that I found to actually kind of like make it all worth it, because there's stuff you don't expect. You think, man, this sucks. But down the line, when you start buying your fourth, fifth RV park and you need capital from people you haven't met and you don't have a relationship with, they're going to ask you every question under the sun. And you'll be able to answer it because you're like, hey, I've been there, done that. They'll say, why don't you, why do you deliver propane? Why do you have this? And you can say, oh, well, I would do this, but somebody stole, our golf cart that one time or this. And the people are like, okay, and when people can ask you every question under the sun and you can answer it, it goes a long way because that's when people start opening up their checkbook and start investing with you. So everything you do, I would say, jot it down, take notes, be like, hey, do you remember that crazy time? I've had all sorts of stuff where I had a guy show up to paint a house for me. He painted the wrong house. He painted the neighbor's house, which was not a home that we owned. Not only that, he didn't tape it. So he literally just drove around the to the home in the back of a pickup truck and painted the whole thing blue, including the windows, solid blue. And there's no playbook for that. There's no podcast with advice on what do you do in a situation like that. I don't even know where to start. So we had to replace the lady's windows and repaint it and all this other stuff. But that is all stuff that will really help you in the future, and it'll refine. Like you'll start to get really picky in what you look for, and that's when like, okay, you're really starting to figure things out. Because in the beginning, you just got to go. You got to find the deal. If it makes sense, you got to go. But after a while, you start thinking, I don't like that this is in this market, like you said, with 3,500 people. That's too much, you know. But how would you have known that if you hadn't done it, right? So I commend you for taking the first step. That's what gets most people.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, cool. What else have we not gone over that you think would be really interesting for people to know. Like, I'm really curious as to like the youth aspect of it, because I know there's some states you can't even enter into a contract without being 21. So what are some of the unique challenges that you found? It doesn't just have to be because you're young, but what are some of the unique challenges you found that other people you think would benefit from hearing about?
Yeah, well, um, I don't know if they necessarily benefit about it, but it might be a fun listening. There was definitely challenges with me because when I signed, I was 2 weeks from my 18th birthday, so I was still 17. We were signing the papers, and the bank, well, no, there was no bank, but there was still a bank account. And so I was on the bank account, and it was a business account, and I was on the LLC, and I was on all these things that were legitimate, right? At 17. And then we're signing the closing docs. We actually signed Monday. We're signing the closing docs. And then the notary takes a second look after we've already signed everything. Takes a second look at my driver's license and goes, "Wait, you're not 18?" I'm like, "No. My driver's license been sitting in front of you for about 30, 45 minutes.
It's the
I'm
wrong
not 18."
orientation too. Yeah. Wow.
Right? Right? And she's like, "Well, we can't do the transaction because he's on the LLC and he can't be on the contract and he can't be on the title because he's not 18." And so we had to go back. We had to pull me off the LLC and tell the seller what was going on. We're still going to close, but we might need an extra day or two because of this. Um, and we actually ended up closing on time, and everything was cool and fine and dandy. And I got back on the LLC in about 3 or 4 weeks when I refiled the paperwork after my 18th birthday. But it was funny. This just like I was already on the bank account. I was already on the LLC with the government. Um, there was a couple. I'd already signed the LOI and all of that. The broker got his hand involved, and he wanted us to re-sign the LOI because I was on the LOI, and my dad's like, "No, no, there's no point. We're way past that. We're 2 days from closing, whatever, right?" But no, yeah, it was definitely a little wrench in the works. It was fun.
Nice. I don't even think you can rent a car till you're 26. Can you rent? That would be funny. If you called somebody to rent an RV and they're like, "Hey, we can't," and you'd be like, "Hey, I own an RV park. Make an exception." But that's
So
crazy, man.
here's what's really funny, and this is actually something that can apply to probably some 35, 40-year olds, but I'm not allowed to rent at my park. I'm too young. hmm We had an 18 or 19-year-old renting there, and he was bad and kicked him out. And so we decided we're not renting to people under 21. So I am old enough to own, but not old enough to rent.
Awesome. That is
Yeah,
so
and I'm
funny, man.
actually with a group of young kids who are already in the space and trying to be the front on a teaching program to teach other kids coming out of high school or college who want to get in, and we're being the front, but then there's older wisdom behind us too. But again, they are in already in deals, and one guy goes, "Yeah, we're old enough to own, not old enough to rent. We can't rent a rental car, but we can own rental property." It's pretty funny.
That's crazy. In the Navy, I remember I was older when I joined the Navy. I was about 22. But some of my friends were 18. They couldn't get a beer. And I was like, man, what a slap in the face. You could sign away your life, but you can't. They won't let you get a beer. That's crazy. But man,
Right.
I love hearing the story. All awesome stuff. I appreciate you taking the time to walk me through all this and have the conversation about it. I feel like I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but man, Jared, appreciate you having on here. So if anybody wanted to reach out and get in touch with you, what are some ways they could do that?
Yeah. So I'm not on social media, and that's not because I'm lazy. It's because of a decision to be home with my family. Even though I'm only 18, I'm building for the long term. You can reach out to me. My email is jared@investnoi.com. Um, email me, or I guess text me, 480-514-2744. Yeah, or give me a call, I guess.
Cool, man. Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I'm sure that people do too. If they're like me, they're going to have even more questions for you on how you did it. My kids better be buying something at 18 now that I know it's possible. I'm going to look back at this in 18 years and make sure my little daughter's is doing what she can. But cool, Jared. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Yep, definitely. Thank you for having me on.
Anytime.